It is November 16th, 2021. This is The Daily Rob, and make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff that helps us in the algorithm. And you can always listen to us on all major podcast platforms. Without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Rob Smith.
Bonjour, Monsieur Stuart.
Howdy, how are you?
I am fine. As you can see, I'm still over here in Frogland. I've had a busy day. I went to the Bastille. I went over to Versailles. I went to the Louvre to see if my artwork is still up. It is. Big crowds there to see it. So I've had a pretty good day, Stu. I had a little libation at a couple of cafes. It's been a good day.
Right on. Good to hear. So, what is going on in the news today?
Well, Stu, thanks to capitalistic technology, even though I'm over here in France, I still get all the news. It's amazing. Big news today, from yesterday, is again, the tyrannical world we live in, Stu. The power-hungry leftists and Democrats, they just know no bounds. Steve Bannon was turned himself in yesterday after he was indicted. He was indicted for not answering the subpoena issued by Congress. This is totalitarian in that nobody has been arrested, I think, for over 100 years for ignoring a subpoena. Congress really does not have any power to imprison somebody. The only thing that they can do is maybe get the Justice Department, the DOJ, involved, and that's exactly what they did. And in previous administrations, the DOJ wouldn't take on a political thing like this. The issue is executive privilege. The president just won a lawsuit on Friday of last week saying that the executive branch does not have any duty to turn over these documents to Congress. But yet, even though they lost that suit, they still indict this guy. So Steve Bannon got out in front of the cameras today after he turned himself in. It's a misdemeanor defense, and said, don't let this distract you. It's just noise. So, Stu, we're living in a post-constitutional world, and they put handcuffs on him while he was in court. Much like they did to Roger Stone, where they had about 100 people and tanks and everything else. But I just want to show you some people under the Obama administration who ignored congressional subpoenas. And this was on big stuff, okay? Eric Holder, held in contempt, refuses to provide subpoenaed information for Fast and Furious. And that was a scandal of all scandals, where the United States government sneaks guns over to the Mexican cartel. They kill people, and what the Obama administration was trying to do was to use that to undermine the Second Amendment and say, hey, we need to restrict the Second Amendment rights here. So killing people, Stu, that's what they did. That was the political objective.
And I guess to this day, the Mexican cartels are able to have complete freedom to do essentially whatever they want. They can't really be controlled by the Mexican government or the Mexican police or the Mexican military. I mean, they are essentially
their own sovereign state almost.
Oh, what is the nice little CIA word that they love to use? They are non-state actors.
Well, they are, and they are operating in the United States and causing great damage. I mean, great damage everywhere. With the opioid crisis, actual slave trading, sex slave,
fentanyl.
Incredible crime. Lois Lerner refused to testify on our IRS targeting. If you remember that in 2010, she wouldn't give these 501c3 groups that were associated with conservatives or the state of Israel approval to raise money. Now, again, using the power of the state, the most jackbooted agency of the federal government, the agency that can take everything you have and put you in jail, she's not held in contempt. Ben Rhodes not allowed to testify on Iran nuclear deal. They gave what was it, Stu? 100 million $1.5 billion in cash? Whose money was it? Where did it come from? Steve Bannon arrested for not complying with a shitty political subpoena that in which a court has ruled that he doesn't have to. It's unbelievable. Treasury officials blocked from testifying on Obamacare subsidies, i.e. payments to political benefactors, Stu. The White House refuses to allow political director to testify. Justice Kagan, Supreme Court, Obamacare conflict on interest. She wouldn't go in front of Congress and talk about her conflicts, and then she voted on it. She voted on Obamacare. She shouldn't have done that. It's anybody who's a lawyer knows about having to recuse yourself from some things. Excuse me. Refusal to provide subpoenaed Solyndra documents, another boondoggle that costs taxpayers $1 billion, crooked as hell, but they don't have to appear before Congress. The people who hold the purse, by the way, refusing to let the White House social secretary testify on party crashers scandal, fighting subpoenas in the new Black Panther Party voter intimidation investigation. They didn't show up. So, Stu, we're living in a post-constitutional world under a totalitarian state. Speaking of such things, right now, Stu, our government is trying to enforce 5-year-olds to be vaccinated with an experimental drug, which has had a very high degree of incredibly adverse effects on young people, including death. Okay? Well, the UK, say what you want about the Brits, but because they've gone crazy as well with the pandemic, but they are keeping records and disclosing them, which we're not doing in the United States under this tyranny. So a study done by very prestigious medical groups, institutions in the UK, including NHS England, the Imperial College of London, Public Health England, the Bristol Royal Hospital for Children, came out with a study in which it's a massive study. They looked at 12 million kids, okay, 12 million. And they determined that these children have a 99.998% chance of survival if they have COVID. But for this, we're making them wear masks in school, and we're shooting this experimental drug in them that kills the children at many multiple times that COVID does by itself. The study also suggested that a child is more than 2 times likely to be struck by lightning than he is to die of COVID. And 125 times higher to be killed by lightning than COVID. And then we have Stu, and this was somewhat surprising. The guy, I must give him some street cred because he does kind of speak out from under the orthodoxy in which he was born and his family, Robert Kennedy Jr. Here's what he had to say. He testified or, in one of these, I don't know what the hell it is, some confab overseas. Here's what he said. When they use the term vaccine misinformation, they are using it as a euphemism for any statement that departs from official government policies and pharmaceutical industry profit taking. Misinformation has nothing to do with whether it's true or false. It only has to do with what the political implications are and who is doing the censorship. It's government officials in league with Bill Gates, with Larry Ellison, with Mark Zuckerberg, with Sergey Brin from Google, and with all these internet titans. He then pointed out that the ones censoring criticism of government policies are the ones who are getting rich. The falsely funded China pandemic has resulted in the greatest mass transfer of wealth to a small handful of individuals. And then he said this is the greatest transfer in wealth. And then he said over $3.2 trillion has shifted into the net worth of the uber wealthy, directly coming out of the working class, which has resulted in approximately 500 new billionaires since the beginning of last year. I don't know about all the wealth transfer stuff, though I do believe a lot of it, but there you have it, Stu. I think things are unraveling in a number of different places.
Yeah, RFK Jr., I've seen him speak at the Ron Paul Institute before. He's a smart fella, and he's always worth listening to. You do have to kind of modulate yourself to his voice. He does have.
Yeah, what's wrong with his voice?
He has some rare condition where his vocal cords will like vibrate more. So
Right.
It sounds like he's almost using one of those
Yeah.
Either bad with smoking and I forget what it's called.
Like he's a bad smoker and it's losing his vocal cords, but
he's always had that, and he was anti-vax before they were throwing anti-vax around all over the place. So he's always kind of been very concerned about vaccine injuries. So he has a long history of being someone concerned about this and, taking the slings and arrows of that label. So
he kind of had a football stadium named after him.
Didn't know that.
Well, I mean, it was his dad, but still, Robert F.K., RFK in Washington. I'd like to have a football stadium named after me, Stu. So maybe after I'm gone, you can arrange that.
Okay, sounds good. So I am very intrigued by some happenings at the White House of late. So one of the interesting things that's been going on has been this kind of narrative that Kamala and Joe are fighting. This isn't the first time it's been reported on, but it's been ongoing. And it kind of came to a head this morning where Jen Psaki had to come out with a tweet specifically saying that Kamala was an integral part of the team. CNN had an article come out that was kind of a hit piece on her and downplayed her effectiveness and all that jazz. Now, I want to just kind of rewind back to March 10th. So March 10th, you have an article, and this is 2020, where she has officially endorsed Joe Biden despite some of their very heated debate moments. And she is seemingly friends with him again. Now, when we look at what her team did in terms of opposition research, they discussed the busing, they discussed Biden working with segregationists, and they understood that if Kamala mentioned this during a debate, that she would most likely not be VP. That when she was doing this, it was to make herself be the number one front runner for the Democrats. But the end of the day, that wasn't the case. She dropped out. By March 15th, 2020, you have Joe Biden's vow that he's going to elect a woman as his running mate. And
A
so
black woman or a woman of color.
So I believe he said that he wanted to have a black woman or a woman of color on the Supreme Court, but he wanted to have a female running mate. And so I guess that kept, and I guess he has to say that so Pocahontas is willing to step out of the race as well. So everything is locked in for him. By August 12th, 2020, she is the vice presidential candidate. And so you can kind of see that the media has already kind of been setting them up to be friends again. But the reality of the situation is that there was a lot of bad blood. So when they went to a commercial break during the debate, Biden actually turns to Mayor Pete and says, essentially, that was unfucking fair. And he's really furious about it. Joe Biden says in a conference call that's leaked to the press that Kamala can go fuck herself. So there's a lot of bad blood. And I want to quote.
Do you think Joe remembers anything that happened?
Yeah. I mean, let's think about all the times where he just gets so irritated with normal people. I think he's kind of a hothead, in my opinion. So I don't think this has been, I think it's a case where it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And it's a very weak alliance. So I kind of want to quote Karl Marx. And so Marx, in kind of response to Hegel, where Hegel says history speaks twice. And Marx's response to that is history repeats itself first as tragedy and a second time as satire. And so what I think we're seeing here is with Obama Biden, you had Joe as the vice president to sell the public that Obama was not a radical and that he was just another Democrat, just a very charismatic fella who just wanted to bring change. Now,
as Joe Biden said, he was clean.
Yeah. Jesus. And so,
you know, if you bathe regularly, you're right up there at the echelon of the Democratic Party.
And so I think the satire the second time around is that now you have, we're supposed to be sold on Joe as not some sort of swamp creature of politics by having kind of Kamala as his stand-in, that he's woke and hip with the times. And so I think that's kind of the satire of the situation. And so as we're kind of seeing these various stories, and this has been going on for weeks, even India is reporting about it, that these things just leak out, that she doesn't feel like she's getting enough support. She feels like she's been distanced from him. Initially, they were at the hip when they first got into office, and now they're kind of in two different places all the time. And so by July 2nd, you kind of start to get this narrative that there's some sort of sabotage going on, and these things are getting leaked out, that her staff is unhappy, that she's not doing well. And now you kind of start to kind of see the media spin things about Mayor Pete. And there's an Amazon documentary about Mayor Pete. It has all these reviews saying, oh, he could be the next president. Who owns Amazon?
Is that a question to me?
Yeah.
Well, the same guy who owns the Washington Post.
You completely got it. So you can already see what the media is already spinning this for Mayor Pete. So if the media is spinning things in Mayor Pete's favor, and he's going to be the most important, Secretary of Transportation, and all of the Biden infrastructure bill is essentially money going his way. Amazon, the Washington Post, they're putting out fluff pieces for him. who's leaking all this negative Kamala stuff?
Well, I guess you could say Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah. And so that's what certain places like Breitbart are reporting. And so Kamala feels this
Do you
is,
think he's that conniving, a little sissy boy like that?
hey, it's Game of Thrones in Washington, D.C.
I did warn you not to trust me.
He's
It's
Littlefinger.
unbelievable.
Kamala, apparently, and this is leaked out from people, she feels that Biden favors Mayor Pete because he's a white guy. And so
Of course
that's
he's
another
gonna say that.
aspect of this.
Yeah. One, you spoke about India. I don't know how many people know this, but Kamala's half Indian.
Yeah. I mean, I pronounce her name the Sanskrit way.
Well, she probably knows nothing about Sanskrit or her own history. But the other thing, which strikes me, and you've spoken about this before on how everything is coordinated. Well, Biden's ascendancy to the throne, so to speak, you can see how that was coordinated amongst an elite.
Absolutely.
In other words, they struck this deal. Even at the debates, you don't bring this up and you have a shot at being the VP. It's all fake. And who's doing the coordinating? Well, it's the Obama people, the very entrenched elite in Washington. It just shows that Biden is a puppet. And three, Mayor Pete. Let me just tell you, Stu, I was just absolutely disgusted to see him in bed with his husband and the baby after, 2 months, and for him to quit his post to be home with an adopted child. Let me tell you, Stu, when my children were born, I didn't take 1 hour off from work. I ran to the hospital when my wife was giving birth. I looked the baby over and make sure he had all of its parts. I went back to the office. To think that you are a secretary of the United States and you take 2 months off, who does that? It's just bewildering to me. Men work and we work long hours, and men with ambition who want to get things done, that's what we do. It's disgusting to me. So that's what I have to say about that, Stu.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what we're seeing is essentially the media stoking the fires of what will be a narrative that is planted and has been planted that Mayor Pete is going to be the next president. He's already so presidential. And then he gets to be,
lying in bed with your husband holding a baby as though you're breastfeeding is very presidential. I'm sure in Beijing and in Moscow, they're looking at that and go, ooh, we're afraid of him. He's so martial looking and presidential.
And then I just want to say one thing. And then he's white bread enough that he can go on Fox News and defend everything. So even there are aspects of Fox News where they're spinning it in his favor as well. Like the Chris
Here's
Wallace.
what I always said about these academic types like Tim Kaine, Buttigieg, or whatever his name is. I don't think they're very smart in that intelligence comes in a number of different packages. What they are is they're academically smart where they're good talkers. But just because you're a good talker doesn't mean you have much knowledge of things, nor does it mean you have any judgment. And unfortunately, in Washington, we have a political class of good talkers. Trump was not a good talker, but he was a blunt talker. But you have these deceitful little wispy, whats, who can be very pliable and can bend the truth and have an answer to a talking head's question that might sound good to the uninformed, but it's really not good substantively.
Yeah, exactly. It's passable. So Mayor Pete is passable enough, but also can appeal to the fringe elements of the left. that need that kind of identity.
He ain't getting the
aspect.
truck driver vote. Let me tell you that, Stu.
Okay. So, but yeah, so just something to keep an eye on because, hey, we're barely even halfway into this administration. And so I think
We're not even halfway.
I know. And so
Yeah.
I think what we're going to be seeing is it's really Biden and Mayor Pete, and Kamala is pushed to the side.
Mhm.
And I say I mean, she's being soft, as it's your phrase, she's being soft Trotsky'd. So she's being,
Yeah.
her political future is being killed, but she is able to, I guess, limp off into the sunset.
Yeah, and I would say, despite all the palace intrigue, she deserves to be pushed out merely for the fact that she's a cackling dolt. But then again, Biden is a feeble old dolt. But you can see where people would want to push her aside because she's an embarrassment.
Well, she took a Faustian deal. She made a deal with the devil to be vice president, and then she doesn't expect to get burned. So I mean,
What'd you get?
in her own way, it's her own fault. I mean, Susan Rice was being floated as the other possible VP pick. She sold off all of her Netflix stock. So yeah, so interesting days ahead. And that's what I'm keeping an eye on.
Way to dig down into the palace intrigues, Stu.
Or just try to give a map. I think that's the important thing is if we can see the roadmap of these various stories that have been planted, I hope to improve media literacy across the board.
There you go, Stu. Media literacy. Hell yeah. I'm all for it.
So you're in France. I'm sure your heart swells when you think of French heroes of the American Revolution. Do you have any wisdom for us today?
I do, Stu. Stu, hold on. Somebody is tugging on me.
Okay.
Voulez-vous coucher avec moi?
I'm sorry, man, but I'm in the middle of a podcast here. All right. Okay. Where was I, Stu? I'm a little startled. That's the third time that's happened to me today.
Damn.
Well, Stu, I do want to talk about a hero of the American Revolution. We know him as the Marquis de Lafayette, but his real name was Marie-Joseph Paul Yves Roche Gilbert de Mortier. I
Yeah.
hope I said that right. Anyway, he was born in 1757, and he was born to a very affluent aristocratic family in South Central France. By the time he was 13, he'd been in military school, and he was commissioned an officer in the French army, which is unbelievable if you think about it. And we know all about how he came to America. We also know that George Washington, who had no biological sons of his own, thought of Lafayette as his own son.
And what does Lafayette name his son?
I think he named him George Washington.
You are correct.
Yeah. And another interesting fact was he conspired with Thomas Jefferson to write the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. Anyway, Stu, and rightfully so, I've never been a fan of Napoleon or really the French Revolution. But during the reign of Terror, they tried to arrest him. He escaped to Austria and he was arrested. He was in jail for 5 years.
Yeah.
Quite the patriot.
And I believe his family was also in jail.
Yeah. Napoleon did invite him back like in 1797, but he took no part in the government.
And he had to refuse the dictatorship as well, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, he got that from his pappy George Washington. Anyway, Stu, here's one of the quotes he said. He was, at 21, I mean, can you imagine when I was 21, I was throwing up Mad Dog at the University of Virginia. He's 21 and he's leading an army, basically. And if you remember when Washington came down from White Plains, this is one of the amazing things about the American Revolution, which makes one think that it could be God inspired. He had to come all the way down from White Plains with the army. De Grasse had to come in and block the British fleet. And guess who held Cornwallis in place such that he couldn't move?
Well,
Lafayette.
Yeah, Lafayette did, and he's sending correspondences to Washington, who's not responding back because they're trying to keep everything a secret about, trapping Cornwallis. And he's saying, I'm doing my best just to make sure nothing happens. We're just trying to cancel each other out. I don't want to lose this. But he's I think it's about like 9 months where he's essentially holding Cornwallis.
Yeah, he was in Southern Virginia for a long time.
Yeah,
that's Suffolk. And well, anyway, I mean, he's a real live friggin' hero for a lot of reasons. Well,
this I believe the first honorary U.S. citizen as well.
May well have been.
Yeah.
And of course, in 1830, he came back to the U.S. for a triumphant visit in which he visited all 24 states, but truly beloved in America, and rightfully so. Well, immediately after the Battle of Yorktown, here's what he said. Humanity has won its battle. Liberty now has a country. And when the government violates the people's rights, insurrection is, for the people and for each portion of the people, the most sacred of the rights and the most indispensable of duties. That's all I gotta say, Stan.
Do you hear the people sing, singing the song of angry men? This is the music